You know, the gospel is good news. And we're given, the word gospel means good news. And the Greek word evangelion means the same thing. And we have 4 books in the New Testament that are called Gospels. And the interesting thing, if you ask somebody what is the gospel, you'll get different answers from different people. But Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when they thought about what the gospel was, their answer was Jesus. Everything they could tell you about Jesus, they wrote down for us to know. And they called it the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Mark, the gospel according to Luke, the gospel according to John, because the good news of God is encapsulated in the life, the ministry, the words, the actions of Jesus. Now, I talked a little bit last Sunday about Mark and how his gospel is probably the earliest one. It's also the shortest of the 4 gospels, and it moves very fast. Probably the most commonly used word in Mark's language is the word immediately, because it's a very action-packed book. This passage we read today, beginning in Mark chapter 5, is part of a longer series of stories. And in the Gospel of Mark, you find stories within stories. This passage probably begins, or as part of a day that begins in the first verse of chapter 4 and goes all the way through the end of chapter 5. And it's a jam-packed day, according to the way Mark tells the story. It's possible all of these things didn't happen on the same day, because it would have been a big, big, long day for all of the things in those 2 chapters to happen. But the way Mark tells the story, it's all together. He does his teaching, he does his explaining, he gets in the boat, he stills the storm, he goes over to the other side, he finds the man who's among the tombs, he casts out demons, they go into the pigs, the people from that town gather around and say, "Please go away," and he gets back in the boat and he comes back over to where he was teaching earlier in the day. That's the way the story seems to go, okay? And so our passage begins. It was already evening when he left the first time, and now he's been across. No wonder he was sleeping on the way across. It's been a big day, and he's tired. Now he's gone back across the other time because they didn't want to keep him in that part of the world where he upset their way of thinking so much by healing that man. And so now the crowd that he was teaching earlier is still there. They're waiting for him to get back. And he's met by some people with problems, because, you know, one thing you're going to find out is that people with problems start to seek Jesus out because he seems to be able to solve problems. When you're walking and working in the name of Jesus, people with problems are as like as not going to seek you out, because they're going to see something in you that will say to them, "That person can help me." Okay. So let's see what happens in this thing. He's met by an important man, the leader of the synagogue, a religious leader in that place, who comes to him begging him to come on behalf of his daughter. "My little daughter is on the point of death. Come, lay your hands on her so she may be made well and live." He's asking Jesus to do a particular thing for a particular need. And of course, Jesus doesn't need a lot of begging. He responds by saying, "I will come." And so they all set out, and this whole crowd is coming along, because this important official in the place has asked Jesus to do something, and it's urgent. You know, this isn't going to wait. You can't wait till tomorrow on this one, because this is happening right now. What we're going to see in this is how Jesus deals with pressure. It's going to give us some instruction on how we, as people of God, can deal with overwhelming pressure on our lives when multiple needs press in upon us. which is what was happening in Jesus' case. If you read the whole, I would encourage you to read the whole Gospel of Mark, beginning to end, in one go, if you can take time to do it, because you'll see how things flow. Because this theme of how to respond under pressure continues even beyond the passage we're going to look at today. He is on his way to take care of this urgent issue that has been brought to his attention. And while he's on his way, here comes a woman. She has had the same problem for 12 years. It's a chronic issue. She has been fighting a losing battle against this problem. She's also pretty desperate, but it's not urgent like the little girl. And she doesn't think it's something worth bothering him much about or making a big commotion about. She just wants to get close enough to Jesus just to reach out and touch him one time, because she believes that if she can just reach out and touch Jesus, even so much as touch his clothes, then, she's going to get some healing. And that's what she's saying to herself. And so she's not trying to interrupt anything. She's just in the crowd, going along with Jesus, but wanting him to touch her disease as he's on his way to do this other thing. She's not trying to stop him from anything else, but she really has a need that hasn't been addressed by anybody else, and she's kind of letting Jesus be her hope. Now, here's an interesting thing. As she reaches out and touches him, Jesus knows what's going on. Who touched me? He says. Somebody touched me. He stops and he looks around and he says, someone touched me. I felt something going on. I want to know who that was and what's going on. And the disciples are saying, wait a minute, you're on your way to do a very important thing for a very important person that has a very pressing need, and people are bumping against you and pushing you around in the crowd, and you want to know who touched you? What kind of crazy is that? But he said, somebody touched me, and I want to know who it is. And so this dear woman, it says, she came and she told him the whole story. Now, if she told him the whole story, that means it's going to have to take a little while for her to tell about her problem and how it started, and the physicians, the doctors she went to, and what they did, and how that didn't work, and how she's been getting worse for 12 years. She's got a big story to tell, and so when somebody gets telling a story, if they're not especially a trained public speaker, it can take a while to get it all out, especially when you're, taken by surprise by the events. So she's explaining all of this to Jesus, and he is saying to her, you know what, your faith has made you well, you can go in peace. And he's having this conversation. He's counseling this woman. He's explaining to her that she did the right thing and she's going to be okay. And in the middle of that, notice what Jesus is doing. He's not going to let himself get distracted by the urgent to take him away from the immediate. Sometimes we're so busy trying to meet a need that another need goes unnoticed right underneath our noses. And Jesus, although externally he's under lots of pressure, he does not seem to feel the pressure, because he's trusting in his Father and he knows what's going on. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace, he says. And meanwhile, some people come up and they say, you can almost get the tone of voice here. It's probably not very friendly. While you've been out here wasting time with this woman who's had the same problem for 12 years, this little girl that you're supposed to be helping has been dying, and she's gone now, so you might as well not bother. Go away. Now, we don't have those words, but you can kind of get that tone of voice. Your daughter is dead. Don't bother. He's obviously doing something more important with this lowlife woman who didn't have the good sense to stay in her place. That's the attitude. Now, it might not be the attitude, but it comes across that way to me. Don't bother the teacher anymore. It's too late. It's just too late. Nothing's going to work now. Might as well not bother. Might as well just give up. Might as well just go home. And what does Jesus do with that? Overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the man Jairus, the leader of the synagogue, "Don't be afraid, only believe." Now we saw when they were in the boat with the storm that faith and fear cannot occupy the same space. So he's telling this man, don't be afraid, just believe. We're going to keep on going. Jesus is not in a hurry, but he's also not giving up. He's not ignoring the problem. He's on his way still. But he knows better than we do what's urgent. So they get there, and you find the funeral proceedings have already started. People, they had professional, in that day and time, they had professional wailers who would raise up a cry, and they would bring people in, and people would do this on their own. They would weep and wail to indicate the mourning and the loss. And so this was already going on. They were already talking about what a horrible thing had happened. It says, people weeping and wailing loudly, and a commotion going on, and he says, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? This child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Now, I want to say something about this because Jesus is about to do a very important healing. And I want you to notice how healing really takes place. There are crowds and crowds of people around. What an opportunity for somebody to make a big statement about God's power and show the whole crowd everything and put this girl on display. But he doesn't do that. He puts them all outside. He takes with him 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. The immediate family, the mother and the father, and everybody else is out. And he goes in quietly to deal with this person. Speaks to her in her own language, very calmly, tells her to get up. And without making a big deal or a big fuss or a lot of noise, because there's already all kinds of other people making noise, Jesus has restored this young lady to her parents. So often when God does a marvelous miracle, he will do it quietly. He won't do it in front of the cameras, maybe. He won't do it in front of the crowds, most likely. He'll do it in the presence of those who care the most about what needs to be done. He doesn't do it to score points or to get an advantage. He does it for the sake of the person who's being healed. And so it is in this case. Very interesting thing. Have you ever thought about why Jesus said, "Don't tell anybody about this"? This contrasts so much with what we see sometimes on television or in public ministry of people who say, "Oh, I've got a healing gift or something. I don't I don't discount any of that, because who knows what God can do through whoever. But in this case, Jesus says, you know what? Don't go blabbing about this. Don't be telling people what went on here. Just kind of keep it on the down low. And make sure this kid gets something to eat, okay? Take care of your daughter. Don't go on talk shows, you know. Don't make the rounds. Just take care of your child and be thankful that God has restored her to you, and live your lives and keep on living well. Just like he sent the other woman away saying, go in peace because your faith has healed you. That was very public because she was in public when she came to him. In the same way, he's saying to this family, get back to normal. Just be real people. Don't make yourselves into something great out of what I've done. And give God the glory. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. There are a few lessons that you and I might learn about how to respond under pressure from this story. The story kind of speaks for itself. We don't ever need to be pressed to the point of upset or distress, because even though somebody might think you're running behind, and you might think so yourself, in the face of God's grace, you're always going to be right on time. God always shows up right on time. Even when people say it's too late, even when the world looks like it's too late, just like when they woke him up in the boat. They were thinking it was too late and he shouldn't have been sleeping, but he woke up and calmed the sea. In this case also, he just responds to a real need at the right time. His time is not necessarily our time, and we're prone as human beings to think that God is running late. But if I've ever, I really love this story, because it speaks to me about the pressures in my life and the things that I might want to succumb to sometimes. Sometimes I think I got 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 different important things to do, and God will bring a person into my presence whom he just wants me to deal with that minute for a little while. And if I listen to that still small voice and allow him to work, then oftentimes there's a blessing that I did not expect. God wants us to operate from a position of peace. He wants us to start there. And he wants us to carry that with us wherever we go. When Jesus sent the disciples out 2 by 2, he spoke about this. He said, wherever you go and whenever you enter into a house, first thing you should do is speak peace to that house. And if there's a child of peace there, your peace will remain. And if not, your peace will return to you. But he's saying to them, you're going to start out with peace, and peace is what you have to give, and no one's going to take it from you. Peace I give to you. My peace I leave with you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you, he said somewhere else. So we can work in peace and in power at the same time. We can bring healing in places it's needed, and healing can even sometimes happen just because we're about our Father's business. We can learn a lot by following Jesus. He took his inner circle with him, his disciples Peter, James, and John. These were his apprentices that he was training to be the leaders, so that they could see what he did and how he did it, so that they could understand enough to know how to do ministry in extreme situations, when people are upset, when people are hurting, when people aren't thinking quite straight or clearly because of the things that are going on in their lives, when there is a lot of pressure. And so study this story. Learn from Jesus. And you're going to be blessed. We're going to sing a little chorus. It's just an affirmation. It's not hard to learn. Some of you may know it.